Welcome back to the world-famous Adventurers Club of Los Angeles. My name is Grant McComb, member number 1231, and today I'm here with Casey Sheppard, returning friend of the club and speaker. If memory serves, you came in 2015 to discuss van life with us. Welcome back. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. It's always great to be here and see everyone and get extremely inspired and go, why am I not doing more? More adventure.
Absolutely. I think that's why most of us are here. We're inspired by the adventure.
Right.
And to kick us off tonight, I believe you have a video that kind of sums up your expedition, and we can use that as a jumping off point.
Absolutely. I do. Yes. This video, it's I made it for my sponsor, Big Agnes, and they're amazing, and it will do a nice little overview. Give you a lot of points to question me about.
Perfect.
Dive in.
Sounds great. Well, I can't wait to see the video.
Thanks. Me too.
Well, while we get that loaded, while we get that video going, why don't you give me a 30-second overview of your trip and where you've been since you spoke to us last?
Absolutely. I spoke here, in 2018, and the next day flew to New Zealand, Aotearoa, and I biked across New Zealand. It was supposed to be 30 days. I did it in 31, over 3,000 kilometers, self-supported, and I was alone. That is the broadest overview because there's so many stories within it and diving in, and it was a life-changing experience. I came back and I couldn't sit on a bike for about 4 months. I was like, ooh, yeah, sit bones did not like that. And then I took some time off, and then the pandemic hit. Oh, I did make a film though in between there. I made a documentary film.
Just a film.
Yeah, my first documentary film about 7 adventurous women who faced trauma and how nature and adventure helped with their journey through healing. So, yeah.
Fantastic.
And now I'm here.
Fantastic. Well, I can't wait to talk about that more as we progress with the evening, but it looks like your video is loaded, so I'd love to see that.
Perfect.
I live a life on the road, which can sometimes be scary, but it's always an adventure. This is a little insight and recap into my life. This is Casey Lindemann.
Even though it was brutally cold out, and it was the dead of winter, I woke up every day and walked to the gym. I spent all my time, my energy, and all my efforts into this one trip. I hit snags at every turn, but I kept going. I struggled to figure out how to finance such an expensive trip. And I came across the Big Agnes Bob Swanson Memorial Grant and thought, what if? So I applied. I knew I wasn't going to get it, but then I did. Then I was off to New Zealand. I couldn't imagine a more epic adventure than to Aotearoa, pushing your limits in nature in a foreign world far from home and traveling by bike. Self-supported, 30 days, 3,000 kilometers, camping, and solo.
7 hours I biked today. Very much alone. I'm ready for sleep.
And after the first day, I thought, what did I get myself into?
My hands and feet are so cold and damp. It's so disgusting. If I had this at home, I'd gross out, but I'm really good. Mr. Frodo, just a little further.
During the tour, I kept thinking back to the grants. When I was applying, I did some research on Bob. And I found he traveled the world, he was humble, and he took his time enjoying each adventure.
I've been eating much in the last 24 hours. My body absolutely hurts. Look at my eye, it's all swollen because my eyelids got sunburned, which I didn't know was possible when you're awake. Misdirections Closed roads.
I mean, getting up isn't the problem, it's like getting out of the tent.
I ate like 3 times more than I thought I would eat.
That's why I think I had the really awesome privilege of winning this grant, is because I think it's something that Bob would do himself.
About 3, 4, 5. Tree tried to kill me. Rule number like gazillion of this trip, which I actually knew this rule. Don't camp underneath a tree. What? That was so pretty. It just was so pretty. I didn't want to get wet. And it was dumb. I heard this cracking at like 3:45. I was like, that's a tree branch. When I could hear it was high up in the tree. And I got up to see if I could see it, and boom! A 15-foot tree branch. And reaffirm that. No, you don't camp underneath trees.
Well, okay, maybe Bob wouldn't have camped underneath a tree, but I know he would have loved this adventure.
Oh.
The magical day of New Zealand.
So close, this is crazy, and thinking like back for 30 days.
My best friends. They are my best friends in the whole world on this trip. You can break me down, beat me up, do whatever you need to do to me, but I'm gonna keep going.
And I really hope that during the tour, Bob looked down and he lifted his glass to me and said, "Keep at it, kid." I'm not really sure if that's what he'd say, but my version of Bob would.
I'm exhausted, I'm ready to be done with this.
And after 31 days, and after riding over 1,900 miles, I pulled into Bluff and into the finish line. I found out dreams do come true, but you can't do them alone. Thank you to my family and my friends for all your support, and a big, big thank you to Big Agnes and to the Bob Swanson Memorial Grant. I'm proud to be able to carry on Bob's legacy. Because of this grant, this trip, this adventure, you made it possible. So thank you.
Snakes and dogs, dogs and bugs.
Arr! There's pirates in me panties!
What a great video introduction tonight for what seems like a fantastic trip. So I'd love to start at the beginning and ask, why cycling? Why New Zealand? And what was your preparation process like? Like, what was the first kind of spark in you that said, I'm going to do this specific thing?
Great questions. Cycling, you know, I am a late bloomer when it comes to cycling. Except, okay, I rewind a little bit. When I was a little kid, I loved to build ramps and try to, you know, catch air on a bike. But then I kind of grew up a little bit and was told that girls don't do that. And so later on, when I was in my 30s, I was introduced to the mountain bike. From a boyfriend, and I just was like, what do you do for 4 hours in the woods? Like, I don't get this. And I was introduced to the mountain bike, and I'm like, ooh, I get it. And I dove in really hard and really fast, and I started doing races and long endurance, like 10-hour races, and just fell in love with the pain of hurting myself on a bike and being uncomfortable for hours and hours. And then why New Zealand? I don't know why New Zealand. I've been thinking this because I knew you were going to ask me this question. I'm like, he's going to ask me this. And I'm like, I don't know. I think it just kept popping up on my radar. And then when I started looking at it, I'm like, yeah, why not? And it's really far away. I have never been that far away from home. What was your last question? Oh, the preparation.
Yes.
Thank you. Preparation. I just wanted to be on the bike as much as possible. I normally train in the winter outside, but I was terrified I was going to break something and slip on ice. So I trained inside and just sat on the bike. And I think I know, like when I do something adventurous, I know that it's like real when I can't sleep at night. And I'm like terrified by it. But what really sparked it, why I needed to do this, I was living in a van for 2 years. And the reason why I really moved into a van and travel around was to bike, and I wasn't biking. And I'm like, I have to change something. I'm driving nonstop to try to make a living. I need to be on this bike. I need to be in nature. And for me, the only thought was something big and beyond me so that I would be forced to do it. And that's where the trip came from.
That's fantastic. And you had this idea and you applied for this grant, and it seems like there was a relatively short amount of time between when you received the grant and you said, okay, I'm doing it, I'm going. Talk to me about like the process for the grant and just the feelings of that you experienced as you got closer to the day of departure.
Yeah, so I had been working and been sponsored with Big Agnes since van life, and Rob Peterson's amazing. He has really helped me and supported me along the way. And when this grant, it was the first year the grant came out, was in 2018. And I'm like, I'm not really an adventurer, but I'll apply, I'll see. And I applied, and I didn't even think about it. It's kind of like one of those, like, what is that story? They say the lottery ticket, like, until you buy a ticket, you can't win the lottery. So it was kind of those moments, and I didn't even think about it. And then Rob sent me a message, and he's like, Casey, just so you know, you won. And I'm like, me? Are you sure? Like, me? And he's like, yes, and it's on the way. Well, the thing is, they gave such a large amount that they weren't expecting to give, and I was the first recipient, which was really such an honor. It arrived 2 days before I left for New Zealand.
Talk about timing.
Talk about timing. It was perfect timing. And I didn't buy my plane ticket until January, and I left in February, or maybe it was December. Like, I think I was dragging my feet a little bit, and then finally I'm like, oh, Casey, you gotta do this. Like, you leave. You're doing this. And I think buying the ticket was the first, like, this is gonna happen. And then leading up, like, I remember I was in Nebraska at the time training. That's where my mountain bike community is and where my family was at the time. And it was a time I could be off the road and just train. And I flew to LA to come to the Adventurers Club and speak and hang out with my friend James. And I got really sick before, and I was like, great, I'm gonna do this tour and I'm gonna be sick. But I landed in New Zealand, and it's like pure magic there. So it just healed me, and then it started. So once I landed, I was fine. I was like, let's do this.
That's fantastic. Now, in terms of the gear itself, so you had been pretty seasoned at that point in terms of gear. You're doing these long mountain biking trips, 10 hours plus a day. What was the thought process behind the gear? Did you change anything? What did you add? What did you choose? Give us some insight into that.
Absolutely. I had never done an overnight camping solo. I had always gone with people. And so prepping, I didn't have a lot of money. So I did go to like the OR show, which is the outdoor retailer show, when it was in Salt Lake City. One of my sponsors got me in there, and I went. And it's so funny. There's this really great, I can't remember the name of it. It's a German company that makes these amazing, super expensive bike gear, but it's like lifetime bike gear, right? And they were doing a giveaway, and they're like, oh yeah, put your business card in, we'll pull a business card. Well, I was the only one that gave them a business card, so I'm like, here we go, right? No, one kid showed up right before, or a guy did, he showed up and he was like, right before they pulled my card out there, he's like, no, I wanna put my card in, because I wanna win it for my kid. And they pulled his card. I was like, okay, it goes to a kid. Okay.
Yeah.
I can't feel so bad. So I went really cheap on the gear. I didn't even have a seat bag, and my frame bag wasn't waterproof, which I didn't find out till New Zealand. But my seat bag that I used to make my own makeshift seat post bag, it was the only true dry bag I had. Thank goodness. And even like my rain gear, I thought I bought a rain jacket, and until I was riding in New Zealand and had pools of water in my jacket, I realized I had a windbreaker.
Slight difference there.
Slight difference, who knew? So there was a lot of learning curves. And gear, I thought I knew gear, but you never know until you go into it. I mean, I had to go out, I did do a sub 24 hours on my own, because I'm like, I need to know what this is like. So I did go out and do like, I think it was a 25 mile, and maybe it was 50. And went out and did just a gravel ride, and went out and camped in the middle of nowhere and came back. And I was like, I'm good. No, it was not good.
You were not good.
It was not good. The first day, everything fell off. That was actually constant. Everything fell off. Actually, if you see at the end, there's a photo, and everything is just rigged perfectly to stay on the bike. It's like balanced. You won't see it, but I see it.
Gotcha. Now, in terms of, somebody, has relatively little experience with bicycle camping and longer trips like this, in hindsight, what would you recommend they do right off the bat that maybe you didn't?
I would say do exactly what I did, because if you don't know if this is what you want to do, don't invest in the gear. If you're going to go bike across New Zealand for 30 days alone, self-supported, invest in the gear. Like, that's a no-brainer, absolutely. But if you don't know, make it work, make it happen. And I'm glad I did it the way I did, because I learned so much about what I could accomplish and what I truly needed and what I didn't need. And actually, at the end of the day, it's not about the gear. It's about the adventure, and it's about connecting with the people, the nature, and yourself. That's ultimately what this is about. The gear just gets you there and helps support you along the way. It's a tool.
So let's talk about those first couple days of that adventure, leading into this 30 days of solo travel. What were those first couple of days like? You're just getting out there. I'm sure there's a lot going through your mind.
There was. It was so funny. So you take a bus up to Cape Reinga, which is the very northern part of the North Island, and it's a very sacred place. And it's a beautiful place. It's where the Tasman Sea and the Pacific meet, and it's a very chaotic kind of spot, but it's a beautiful area. And I was on the bus with all these Kiwis, and they're all like hardcore. They got their zinc on, and they're like ready to go. And and they're like, you're from Nebraska? There's no hills there. There's mountains here. And I'm like, Nebraska? Like, so they would call me Nebraska. It was really nice and warming. And they made me really feel welcome, but also I felt very foreign. And we show up, and you're supposed to have like a reservation. Well, you didn't have to have a reservation for your campsite. And I rolled in, and I was like, I don't have a reservation. And they're like, all the Kiwis turned their heads like, you don't have a reservation? And one lady's like, you have reservations all along the way, don't you? And I said, no, I don't know where I'm staying. And they were freaked out. And then it freaked me out, because I'm like, should I know this? And so I just kind of rolled with it. I mean, I almost missed the start because I didn't actually read the cue sheets before. I did so much prep that you just can't do it all. And I learned very fast. And I knew the stuff that I could get by with. But once I was on the road, and all my bike gear fell off, and I stopped every 10 minutes to put the bike gear back on, I actually got onto 90 Mile Beach, which this is that photo right there. That's 90 Mile Beach. It's actually not 90 miles, but you're in the middle of nowhere. It's beautiful, and it's hard sand, and you can just ride on the beach. And I was all alone. I was in way over my head. There would be these patches where I'd be riding along, and I'm like, I'm in New Zealand, I'm biking, I'm doing this, and smack, I would just hit the cockpit, because you'd hit this big chunk of wet sand, and it just would throw you. You just get back on, you're like, okay, and you're in your la-la land, and boom, again. And then there's a point where I ran out of water. I didn't know where I was. I was like, I'm on this beach. There's nobody around. There's these sand dunes. Like, it leads to nowhere. I think I might die. And it's my first day. Like, I can't hit the panic button on the first day. So I was totally freaked out, and I'm like contemplating what to do. Like, keep riding, Casey, just go towards this destination. Like, you'll get there. You're not gonna die on your first day. You're okay, you're okay, you're okay. Big old bus of tourists drives down the beach. And I'm like, oh, well, okay. Way to be dramatic. But after that, it was hard. It was hard for the first week. And then it got a little bit easier. But the first couple of days were, this is Tanya. She was amazing. She came right up to me at the first campsite. She knows, like, everyone in New Zealand knows what's going on. And she's had, it's TA riders, the tour Aotearoa riders, for a month now. And we're the last group. And I'm the last one of the last group. And I roll in and she's like, I know what you need. And she made me this like $15 smoothie, and it was the best thing in the world. And I was sunburnt, and I was so happy to see her and to crawl into my tent and get some sleep.
So it sounds like a lot of joy and relief after that first day.
Oh yeah, yeah, after almost dying.
After almost dying, yeah.
Yes, it was, and isn't that beautiful? Like that, I went in to go take a shower, and I'm like, that's my home. That's my home for 30 days.
So it seems like there's a lot of natural variability in terms of landscape that you were riding through from, end to end.
Oh, absolutely. A lot of the tour is on like tarmac or pavement. It definitely is paved, and there's not a lot of shoulders, and there can be a lot of traffic, but this was going through the beach, and then there was mountains, and I mean, like, I rode that gravel road. Like, you can see that little strip right there. I turned around. I was riding in the middle of nowhere. I turned around, and I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. Like, this is why I bike. This is why I'm here. And those moments, I mean, they still stick with me. It's like, I don't care if I'm bleeding and hurting. It's like, this is magic.
I mean, it looks like it. I mean, look at that. It's practically the Shire.
It is. I know, and I'm a huge Lord of the Rings Hobbit fan, so that didn't help at all. See?
Yeah, there you go. That's fantastic.
I took a morning off. I wasn't going to. I was like, no, I have to stick to my schedule, which I don't really like to do. I like to take my time. But I was like, I have to go to Hobbiton. You have to.
Which is in New Zealand.
It is.
Is it the actual set, or is it a rebuild?
So there's two sets. So Mata Mata is the part of New Zealand where when they did Lord of the Rings, they built Hobbiton. And actually, you know that bridge that Gandalf takes in, that cobblestone beautiful bridge, they brought in the New Zealand Navy and they built that, or they volunteered or something. It was really cool to hear that it was a huge community event to come together. But after Lord of the Rings, they like ripped it out, and people are like, wait, we wanted to see it. So then when they did The Hobbit, they left it and opened it up for tourism. But you can't go in there. There's only umbrellas in there. I was so disappointed. I'm like, I want to see like the round hallway, right?
Yeah.
That's in Wellington in a sound stage. I was like, sorry, I should say like spoiler alert for Hobbit fans, but I did have a drink at the Green Dragon, and I FaceTime with my brother there.
That's fantastic. For those of you who don't know, the Green Dragon is the famous pub in Lord of the Rings. I can't imagine going on a bike trip, taking a couple of wrong turns and winding up in the Shire, but fantastic that you had that opportunity. It sounds like at about the 7-day mark, you hit your stride.
If you want to call that.
Okay.
I would say on day 31, I hit my stride.
Okay.
I feel like that's everything I've done. I'm like, on the last day, I'm like, oh, I got this. Let's go. I'm done, right? 7 days, it became like my knees were so painful. So I didn't really train with like full loaded gear. So when I was on the sand, I was like, this is so hard. It's so tough. And then I was like, well, once I hit tarmac, I'll just fly, right? No, I mean, I have a steel bike, which is great. I ride a surly karate monkey. So it's a hardtail. So it's not full suspension, which is nice, which is a little bit lighter, but it's steel, and it's fully weighted down with water and everything. And it was so hard. It weighed 70 pounds. And, you know, that's why I used to train outside and never trained on a trainer inside, because you don't truly get the effects of what a bike is and does and moves and nature and elements and the grid of going up and levels and mountains. So my knees really hurt and were struggling for the first. I covered them in Salon Paws every night when I went into my tent. But after 7 days, my knee stopped hurting. I was nervous. I was nervous that I was going to have to pull the plug, but they adapted and I kept going.
So your knees hit their stride at about the 7-day mark.
Yes, my knees did.
Perfect. So the bike itself was 70 pounds. What about the gear? What was the total weight?
No, that was like fully loaded.
Fully loaded, 70
pounds.
Okay.
Yeah, fully
Awesome.
loaded, yeah.
So 70 pounds, it's about day 7, your knees are hitting their stride, you're really moving into the rhythm of the ride. What does that, next week, 2-3 weeks look like? You know, you're traveling alone, so that's, something that you have to take into account.
Yeah, I am alone. And I felt like very much alone, even though I did like sometimes yo-yo with one guy, Ed, for like a week, and then he just disappeared. I don't know what happened to him. He was just gone. And then, I just really felt alone, but I also, I struggled with every morning. It took me an hour and a half to load up my gear. And it was cold, it was damp. If anyone's ever been to New Zealand, the mornings are so beautifully full of this amazing fog. It's like, it is when you watch, that's why I watch Lord of the Rings over and over, because it's just like, that's it, that's it, all the elements, and there's that morning fog. But it's so cold, and it gets to your core. And also food became an issue. I ate 3 times as much as I thought I would. That was 1 day of food. I would eat 2 of those chicken satay curries at night, which made me so happy. And all day long, that was 1 day of food. And I was introduced to energy drinks too. I had never had an energy drink. And I used those. I would drink half of a Red Bull or their equivalent before a mountain and go up a mountain. It was insane.
Fantastic. That's a lot of food for a day. In terms of, calorie intake, and you said about 3 times what you anticipated.
Oh, yeah.
So it was a huge difference in what you expected.
Huge difference. I went, and there were times where I have a gluten allergy too. So which I can navigate. I'm like, okay, you can find stuff. That's not a big deal. But there weren't places to eat. There were times where I would be like, okay, I would have to really be like, I don't have any food, so I have to keep going because it's been almost 12 hours since I've had food. I need to keep going. Or sometimes it would be, I remember I did the Timber Trail. That was about a week in, and I wanted to do it in 2 days, but there was no food. I thought there was food, but there wasn't. So anyway, so I had to do the whole one. I ended up getting to the spot at night. It was dark. The guy took me to a community center that I rolled in. Like, people knew that I was around because the spot tracker, they would find you and be like, knew that you were coming into a town, which was kind of creepy a little bit, but it was supposed to be for my safety. And I rolled into this town, and he's like, I don't have room for you. I'm like, that's fine. Can I sleep on your yard? And he's like, there's a community center. And I was like, do you have any food? Like, I will buy some food. Do you have any food? And he's like, I don't have any gluten-free food. All I have is a can of beans and a Coke. And I'm like, yes. And I sat there and I used my little pry thing and I pried open that can of beans, and that was one of the best meals I had on my ride.
There you go. What kind of beans?
Baked beans.
Baked beans. There we go.
Right?
That's
like
great.
Coca-Cola. I don't even drink Coke at home. But it was amazing. It was pure heaven.
So it sounds like traveling alone, and I can't speak for the rest of your trip, but there's really a kindness in connecting with these strangers on your trip who are doing the same thing, or at least know what you're doing enough to really empathize with your mission.
I think, yeah, definitely empathize. I think they definitely were there. Like, there were these signs that would say, like, TA writers, if you need a bed or a shower. And that was really great. I didn't ever need it at that point, but it was great to see the support, and there would always be these signs out. And I remember it was like a couple days in, and it was night. I'd been writing at night, and I was late to get to where I was going. And I see somebody walking. It's a gravel road. I see this light. And I grew up in the country, so I'm used to seeing people walking dogs on gravel roads at night and think anything of it. And then I hear Casey, and I'm like, what? I'm like, I must be really tired. I just heard my name. I was like, no, Casey. I'm like, who the heck is this person? Like, how do they know who I am? And it was before I knew the spot tracker. And it was these teenagers. They'd been waiting for me. They were up waiting for me to show up. They sang me a song on their guitar, gave me watermelon. It was like I think they were thinking, like, wow, she made my day. I'm like, you, like, saved my spirit. Like, you really lifted me up, because I still have 5 more miles to ride my bike in the dark, and I'm just so depleted. And it was constantly having that here or there. It was just, I think they were thinking, wow, look at what she's giving me. I'm like, no, you're giving me something I can't even explain.
So how did you keep your spirit up the whole trip? It probably was a lot of highs and a lot of lows, traveling alone, and keeping that up yourself was probably a pretty daunting task at times.
Yeah, I cried every day. It's all right. I admit it. It's okay. I cried. I tried to not cry every day, and then it made me cry more. A lot of heartfelt notes from family, which was really sweet, but they're, so far away. So I had a really great playlist that would play, or I would sing, like I had Labyrinth. I would sing really loud. David Bowie and I would be singing, and like L7, and get really angry and just like scream. I would pull over to the side of the road sometimes and just be like, this sucks. And I would whine. And it makes you feel better. It was like, I would do things that I would never do around anyone else. I'm like, I would think I would be crazy. But it made me feel better. I just did all the things, and I tried so hard to just conquer and to not let, I called her the tour god, like New Zealand god, like, she was so powerful, and I'm like, you're not gonna beat me down today. I'm not gonna cry. You're not gonna make me cry. And at the end of the day, I'd be crying. But I'd be like, I love you. This was amazing. But I'd be in tears. And there was this moment, I was going up Nelson in the Southern Island, and a lot of people vanished after that. They quit the tour after Nelson. Nelson was brutal. It was, at first, really fun. I'm like, I don't know what they're talking about. Like, I downhill this stuff. This is great. I'm having a blast. I'm like trucking up. Then I'm like, okay, it's still a little long. And then it was just like, this sucks. This is so painful. And I want to eat. And I'm like, no, you have to get to the top before you eat. And this moment where I was like, yeah, there's one of those hills, yeah. That would make me feel better if I made stupid faces like that. It made me feel better. But I got to the point where I was like, I remember in my head, I'm like, I just want this to be over. And I stopped my bike, and I stood there, and I set my bike down, and I was like, no. The moment this is over, even the bad parts, this is done. You have to be here. You have to be present. You have to feel these bad moments just as important as the good moments and everything in between. And that was a huge turning point for me, to be okay with the fact that she was gonna beat me down. That's okay, but I'm gonna keep going, and I'm going to enjoy whatever happens and whatever comes from this, because this is such a one-in-a-lifetime experience that I'm having right now.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it. And if that wasn't your, oh God, I'm quitting today, what was your, oh God, I'm definitely going to quit today moment? And how did you push through that?
It was every day. It was every day. It was like, what am I doing? And I think it was just pushing myself. It was that moment, that's that hill, that's Nelson, that's that face of death right there. And it was that moment. It was, actually, I have to say, that moment I thought was that moment. It was coming down that mountain. It was so steep, and I downhill mountain bike. I love that. That's my jam. And it was so steep and so gravelly. It was so dangerous and treacherous, and I was so exhausted and mentally exhausted, and I wasn't expecting it, and it continued further and further. That was my breaking moment. I just bawled. I let it out. I'm like, stop trying so hard to be something you're not. Nobody is here seeing you. Like, you can truly be who you want to be in this moment. It doesn't matter how you're seen. It's where you are in this moment. Like, you've got to feel this. You got to let this out. There's like, just let go. And it was like letting go of all those things in life and society that are fed in your head, that are so overwhelming of, you should be this way, you should be that way, you need to be tough, or you need to be weak, or whatever, and everything in between. And it was that moment to just let that go and be like, just be, and just let so much of life go. And that was a huge moment for me. It wasn't all sunshine after that, but it didn't need to be.
So it was in that moment you realized that you could just be.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was there anything that you learned about yourself on this trip that was completely unexpected? Something that you didn't expect to encounter?
Something I didn't expect to encounter. I think I didn't. I'm gonna stay. I think I didn't expect. I have to think on that a hot second, because I didn't really go into it expecting a lot. I tend to jump in like head first and see what happens. I don't really put a lot of expectations. What I was hoping that would happen is that I would do this, and then I would do adventures like this all the time and be recognized, and this would be like my shining moment. And it wasn't. And I think that was such a learning curve all on its own, where I was like, it's a culmination of things that make your life. And I was expecting one moment to make my life. And I just think that was something I didn't expect. I didn't expect that I already had everything I was looking for and searching for. And once I understood what I do with my life on a daily, or within this adventure, or there on out, that's what makes me, not this ending up at Bluff at this time. It was everything in between. It's a journey, right? It's not the destination, right? I really, truly learned that definition.
That's great. And I guess 31 days to learn that, right? That's fantastic.
Right.
So over these 31 days, we've talked about some of the lower notes. Talk about the highlights. What are some things that you came across that just blew your mind?
The food. The food was amazing. Like, do you know they have walls of milk at the grocery store in New Zealand? Like walls, litter wall, like huge walls of milk. Now, I have to say I was not drinking dairy at the time, which was really devastating. They have like lime milk. Lime
milk.
Lime.
Huh.
I wish I knew. I could tell you what that tastes like. I don't. But their date and chocolate almond milk, saving grace. And they have these really great pies. Couldn't eat any of those because of gluten. But I went and raided a gas station one night because nothing else was open. And this lovely woman let me stay at her caravan spot because there were no other places, and she was very sweet. She let me stay there. And so I sat in my tent with all my goodies from the gas station, and was super excited. And I got an orange Fanta. You remember orange Fantas,
Oh, yeah.
right? Amazing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I'm like, score, right? Well, I read on it, it said shake it. I'm like, what do you mean shake it? I'm like, is this a joke? So I shake it. And then I decide to open my tent and open it outside, and nothing happens. And then I take a drink, and there's chunks of Jell-O. Oh, I think I just lost my. There are chunks of Jell-O in it. It's carbonated water and Jell-O. It's like some Japanese thing. It was amazing. So that and chips, I was set. That was like one of the most amazing moments. And the kindness of people. You know, the night that the tree fell on my tent, and I literally thought, this is the end. Like, I've been close to death before, but that was brushed my face with its tree limbs. I went to the restroom just because I was in shock, and I walked to the restroom, and I came back, and there was this couple with flashlights looking for me. They thought I was killed. And I was like, I went up and put my arm around, because I was in shock. And I'm like, what are you guys doing? They're like, we were looking for you. And I'm like, you were? And they were like, yeah. And they're like, we saw you camping under this tree. That wasn't a good idea. And so they just hugged me and held me. And it was a beautiful moment. I'm like, the kindness of strangers and when you're in need is just, it was a scary, terrifying, low moment. And then I have to call and tell my family what happened, which was terrifying too. But those were the highlights of the trip.
Almost dying, kindness of strangers. Wasn't Sunny D, it was
Fanta.
Fanta, orange Fanta. Okay, that's pretty darn good highlights.
Oh, and penguins.
Talk to me about penguins.
They have penguins. I had no idea. Yeah, I'm riding my bike at 90 Mile Beach on the first day, and there's this bird running around. I'm like, oh, look at that bird. I'm like, that is a penguin. It's not the beach, but that's really cool too. But it was so cool. They run around, and they have signs that say penguins.
Wow.
Who knew? Girl from Nebraska, I'm like, that's cool.
It's cool to a boy from California. Yeah, that's
right?
great.
It was crazy. And they had hammerhead sharks that washed up on the beach too, which was crazy. And they have possums that they make into possum pies, which I really wanted to have a possum pie. And I went up into the mountains where I heard there's good possum pies, but they didn't have gluten-free. But it was probably good, because I read later they got closed down for serving roadkill.
Well, there you go. Dodged a bullet there.
I was like, okay. So, yeah.
If you don't mind, I'd love to jump back to something we kind of touched on at the beginning. I'm not familiar with the tracking software service that you use through your trip. If you could talk a little bit about that, break that down for me, that would be great.
Absolutely. So one of the requirements for Aotearoa is having a tracking device to keep track of you, and it's a spot tracker. It's a satellite device. It didn't always work. My family actually freaked out the first day because it didn't work. I think I didn't know how to turn it on, honestly, because I had never used one. I sound really stupid, like I didn't prepare for anything, but I really did. I just dove in really fast and was like, when you're alone, there's a lot of things. But the spot tracker is satellite, but it doesn't know, there's so much tree coverage and in New Zealand that it's really hard. There are chunks where it didn't work. And I don't even know if it really even worked in the Southern Island much, because there's just nothing. There's no cell service, there's nothing in the Southern Island. You can, if you need to emergency, you hit this button and it sends an SOS and they come save you. I don't know who they is, but they come save you.
Gotcha.
That's all I know about it. I should know more. Yeah. I do know I had to have it set out, but and you can set it up so you could text family saying when you stopped, I thought I figured it out. Yeah.
So there are a bunch of people watching you through this.
Yeah,
so
my dad actually called me. He was like, Casey, you're going the wrong way. And I'm like, what are you talking? And he was right. I was going the wrong way. But I was like, how? Oh, he was watching me that day. And he just happened. And I was so tired and I turned left instead of right. And he was like, yeah, you're going the total wrong way. So family at home could watch and see what I was doing. And it was kind of cool. If the right people are watching. It might not be cool if the not right people are watching.
Well, it sounds like it's not public, but there are more people than just your family watching. You've got
it is
community
public.
watching you. Oh, it's completely public.
Yeah, it's on their website, which freaked me out. When those kids were calling my name, I'm like, they know who I am, because there's actually a link to my website and they can look up, which was kind of cool at the same time. Like my friend, there was one guy, Tony, he would stop, people would stop on the side of the road and see me. And this guy, Tony, he He was like, so I'm Case of the Nomads, and he rides a bike that's a nomad bike. And he had 2 Coca-Colas and some crackers for me. And he used to be an Olympic indoor cyclist. And so we sat and chatted for a while. And I'm like, that stuff happened all the time. Like I don't know if her name was Vicky, in Wellington. Oh, there's Tony. He's amazing. He was so sweet. And I'm like, these strangers just show up with treats for me. It was so nice. And that was lifting my spirits. But there was another woman, and she stopped in in Queenstown, and she had just finished the tour a couple weeks before. And she said, Casey, we saw you. Every day we watched you. We knew you were alone. And we did it as a group. And we're going, she's up every day. She's doing it every day. We're rooting for you. And I just started crying because I was like, I thought I was so alone. And I had you people there with me. And it was amazing. It was such a gift.
Was there ever like a moment where you thought, I should have done this with somebody? I should have got a group, or I should have,
No.
got part? Good.
No. Nobody wanted to do that with me. I guarantee nobody. I mean, it would have been nice to like ride out and then have meet up, but there's some things you need to do alone.
Yeah.
And this was one of those things. So, I never thought that.
That's great. Well, I think I'd wear a tracker every day if I knew strangers were going to show up with snacks.
Those are the good strangers.
Yes, the good strangers, yeah. Well, I mean, overall, it sounds like it was a fantastic trip, with wildlife and, lots of different, landscapes to bike through. What are some more highlights for you? What are some more things that just really spoke to you?
There's a lot of rain in New Zealand, a lot more than I anticipated. And it was cold. It was so funny. I remember I was riding, and I was in the South Island, and I'm like, why is it getting so much colder and I'm going south? I was so confused for like a day, and then I'm like, oh, because you're you're going towards Antarctica, you're going towards the cold. And so the rain kept getting more and more cold. And there was this moment where I was like, please can you just, TA God, can you just please lift up just a hair for me? I just want just a hair. All of a sudden, I felt a warm splash on my leg, and she heard me. And I look up, and there are these silhouettes of 4 trees, and then a rainbow. And I was like, I felt like we bonded, like the land and I, like we got it. We're like, okay, like you don't have to destroy me, and I don't have to destroy you. Like we're gonna work this together. We're doing this together. So that was a really beautiful highlight, and just having people come up. Like this woman came up to me when I was waiting for the ferry to go to the South Island from the North Island, and her husband saw me and kept going, and she looked at me and she took a double take, and she was like, are you biking? I said, yes. She's like, well, where? And I said, well, I'm biking across New Zealand. And she said, alone? I said, yeah. And she was probably about 20 years older than me, and she's like, women can do anything, can't they? And I'm like, yes. And I felt like we had this really bonding moment. And there were a lot of people that would come up, like one guy came up and he was like, you have sunscreen, right? And I was like, yeah, where were you at the beginning? I had sunscreen, but I had found out that, I don't know exactly, but I think during the summer there's no ozone layer in New Zealand. And I had sunscreen, it wasn't working. So I had to get some sort of that would work in New Zealand, so I got a different sunscreen. But he came up to make sure and was like, my wife's a ginger too, I wanna make sure you're okay. And it was great. And eating was amazing, having such great food, fish and chips that were gluten-free, and just being ravenous with the food. And it was just such a lovely experience. I wish I could have done it longer. Like I really want to go back and do the 6 months like hike through. That would be amazing. Because at the end, I get to the end and I'm like, yeah, 31 days, woohoo, like this is rad. And then there's a group of people sitting there and they're so sweet and they're clapping. And I was like, yeah. And I was like, what'd you guys do? And they're like, we walked it in 6 months. And I'm like, I'm like chopped liver. I'm like, that's amazing. You guys are epic. So that's like calling me back. The land is always calling me back.
That's great. I mean, coming out of this adventure, you're probably feeling, energized and inspired to, go on to the next thing. What is the next thing for you? What are you leaning towards?
The next thing for me, well, I've always been really kind of spiritual in a way, very athletic. I've always been into yoga, and meditation has always been a really big influence in my life. And so I decided during the pandemic to take the leap and get certified as a yoga teacher and mindful meditation teacher. Because when I was in New Zealand, and as I'm going through my training for mindfulness, I'm realizing what I get from these adventures and from pushing myself in these limits is exactly what I'm doing when I'm doing mindful meditation. It's being patient, it's beginner's mind, it's being in the now and no judgment, and being in that present with that uncomfortable or whatever arises. And so I'm looking to take that further and hopefully somehow maybe do retreats and take people, guide people in, and do off-the-grid retreats, do some yoga and meditation and connecting really truly with our land, and hoping to, deepen that connection. Because a lot of us are disconnected from that, and what a gift it is.
That's fantastic. That sounds like a great next project for you. And I hear that you've brought some things tonight to share with us.
I have. I'm a writer too, and a photographer. I'm an artist, and so I created a zine that's based off of. It's the first part of the tour. It drops off right before I take the first day on the bike, and it's very creative. It's a little punk rock. It's a little like zine-ish, which is I love. It's very raw. But what's so rad about it is half of the proceeds I'm donating to the Red Cross of New Zealand. I don't know if you know, but in February they got hit with a horrible cyclone. And they have massive damage. I talked to Jonathan Kennett. The Kennett brothers put on the tour at Aotearoa, and I told him I was speaking, and I wanted to see how I could give back, because New Zealand has given so much to me, and so have the brothers. And he talked about the Red Cross, and that the land, they've really been devastated, the people have, but they have high spirits and would appreciate any help.
Fantastic. And you've brought several copies for us tonight to buy and support that?
Absolutely, and there's some online too. There's digital copies too, but for here too, yeah, so dive in.
Fantastic. And where can we find them online?
caseofthenomads.com.
caseofthenomads.com. Mm-hmm. Perfect. Okay, great. That sounds fantastic. We'd love to support that effort. Thank you for doing that and spearheading that. At this point, I'd love to open up to the audience for questions. I know there are probably a few eager hands.
Hey, Casey, this is Lance. I'm member 1222. Thank you for being here. Great story. I'm going to take the first question. Looking at your photos, there were a number of bridges and paths that looked like they were strictly bike paths. And I'm assuming that this meandered off of fixed roads, or was it all bike paths? Can you give us an idea of what type of path you were on?
Absolutely. There was a lot of different terrain. There was a lot of roads with no shoulders. There were a lot of paved roads. And there were a lot of gravel-style limestone bike paths. There were mountainous roads. There were I had a lot of detours because there was a lot of weather, and so roads actually caved in, so I had to go around a lot of places. There was one bridge that was a barbed wire, or not barbed wire, that would be impossible, or very difficult. It was a chain link fence, and it could just fit my bike, so I'd like push the bike and like walk behind it. It was really awesome. And there were a lot of suspension bridges. I think I probably went over 5 to 10 suspension bridges. And then there were designated, like Timber Trail is mountain biking and trail, and that was designated mountain biking trail. Thank you for your question.
Yeah, we have a question from a member that's watching on the YouTube channel, and Craig Carroll.
Nice.
And he would like to know your time alone out there, your long time alone, what you learned about yourself.
Well, what didn't I learn about myself? You know, I think I really learned about myself that I truly have an adventurous spirit, and I like challenges, and I like to probably, what my family does not like to hear, but I like to be in situations where I have to fend for myself and figure it out, and I'm okay with that. Like, everything wasn't figured out, but I like that, and I didn't know that about myself. Like, I would ask my family advice on things, and they're like, no, 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 don't do that, don't do that, and I'm like, no, I'm gonna go do that, you know, and so it really, that's why I love coming to this club, because it's this community where it embraces that. It's like that voice in your head, but times like 100 of go do that, go seek that. It's okay, that acceptance. And I think that's truly what I learned about myself, is that it's damn awesome being who you are, and keep doing it.
Fantastic. Couldn't agree more. You're definitely among like minds here.
Right?
In the back.
Fantastic adventure. Rich Mayfield, member 1211. So I liked how you showed kind of some video of you talking while you're out there, and I think that reveals a little bit of the internal monologue that goes on. So my question is looking back on that video recording of some of that internal monologue that you had while you were out there, do you see yourself kind of as a different person, or how do you reflect on that internal monologue that came across like in the video recordings?
That is a great question. Yeah, it's looking back, it's like, you're definitely alone. You're definitely in your head. You're definitely on the bike and not having a lot to eat. But it was kind of cool because that version of Casey was so playful and so free and so, I mean, I feel like I am that as well here, but I didn't care about composure or like girls don't do that. Like my entire life, like girls can't play out in the dirt in their underwear. Okay, I felt like that girl again. Like I felt like she was doing that. There's some funny and weird things. Like I look back at some of my notes that I make and I'm like, that was weird. But it's amazing what the mind does, you know, how it feels these thoughts. Like I had my yellow windbreaker, I nicknamed SpongeBob SquarePants, and I was like, be a really big sponge so cars don't hit you. And then I got the orange one later, which was the real rain jacket, and I was like, you are a really tan Saint Teresa. And I'm like, where does this, or Mother Teresa, I'm like, where does this stuff come from? I'm like, she will protect me. And so it worked. It got me through it, and it comforted me and supported me. So it's weird now. It was great then.
I'm going to throw one more in here. I'm curious, when you came back to Nebraska, how had your perspective changed when you looked at your daily activities and things that were possibly problems before or that you didn't appreciate before you appreciate it now? Is there any component to your life that you saw a shift in there?
I appreciated a day off from the bike. That was a really big appreciation. I hadn't taken a day off in 31 days, and I had ridden between, I think the lowest amount of miles were maybe 50 and the highest were 130 maybe. So I was riding big miles for a long time. And so I really appreciated taking a day off. I think also, there were a lot of transitions when I came back. My life took massive, dramatic changes, which if you get the zine, you'll kind of get an inside look on. But my life forever changed. I changed. What I wanted from life changed. What I expected from life changed. And it is because of that tour. And I think that's why I went maybe a little more internal and why I'm looking at, like, you know, with the yoga and meditation, because I'm looking for more connection. And, you know, I went into this to, again, I didn't really have that expectation, but I wanted to conquer and to do and be, and that is all inside. And so I think I could understand that a little bit better. And it also made me realize too that it's okay to be different and not, it's okay to focus on one, like, it makes me ecstatic. I was talking to Bob, I'm like, Bob, I want to go live in your house off the grid. Like, that's what I want, you know, and career, okay, whatever, kids, whatever, marriage, whatever, I don't care. I want that. That's what I want. And to find that acceptance, to be okay with that, was truly what the trip gave me.
Fantastic. To go out into the world and to really see in more clearly is always fantastic. And I think that note of gratitude is a fantastic place to end tonight's talk. Thank you so much for coming and talking to our club.
Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure to have you. Look forward to having you after your next adventure.
I will be back any day. And I just want to say a big shout out to Phoebe. She was fantastic and amazing, and thank you she invited me out. So I'm thrilled to be here, and thank you to everyone here. I really appreciate being here, and I can't wait to come back.
Perfect, yeah, please. And round of applause for Phoebe in the back running AV.
Oh, and zines are up front if you would like, or right here. I can show you, look at